Round of chest compressions, the patient became responsive. Since the patient was wheezing, the crew continued bag breathing treatments during their Code 3 transport to the hospital. Chief Law, Assistant Chief Director of EMS, believes that the patient would have died were it not for Engine and Medic 50's quick response, rapid forced entry into the home, and aggressive treatment with airway control and albuterol treatments. It seems that Mr. White agrees, as he is the one that requested to meet the crew and thank them for their assistance. Excuse me. So can I please have Mr. White come to the podium, along with Captain Aaron Phillips, Engineer Thomas DeGrace, and firefighters David Gomez, Joe Schmidt, and BJ Scoggin. I'm proud to unite you all and congratulate these members of Metro Fire for their coordinated teamwork and outstanding service delivery. All right, that's good right there. And we're going to have your form in this way. Just so how you want to get you here, right in the middle. How about right here? Mr. White, we'll put you in here. And I'm going to slide out and let you have a brief photo opportunity with these one gentlemen. I like to watch the board members scatter. That's why I did that.
My parole officer won't let me get my picture.
All right. Gentlemen, and everybody, on behalf of Metro Fire and our Engine and Medic 50 crew, I'd like to give them a warm welcome. Thanks, everybody. Mr. White, would you like to, I'm right over here, would you like to say anything, or did you have any words you'd like to share with our?
Actually, I do.
Okay, great. I love that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm fortunate enough to live very close to their house. Every time they roll out, I hear them, night and day. And every time they roll, I always say a prayer for them, and no one's going to help. This department has helped my mother on multiple occasions. Although she's no longer here, but she's still here. So my mother taught me to say a quick prayer for all of us first responders. Doesn't matter if you're law enforcement, and fire, and especially the military. I have a high regard and respect for anyone that wears the badge. Again, I am very thankful and grateful for this crew. And I'll tell you now, I have made a lot of changes in my lifestyle. I have. I've even dropped 15 pounds. So, and if I wasn't here, I couldn't do all that. Again, I am grateful to be here today. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White, for your generous comments.
Should start off.
All right. Moving on to presentation item number 2. We have facility conditions assessment. We have Chief Shannon and Economic Developer Manager Jeff Fry. Welcome to the podium, Chief.
Good evening, President Jones, Board, Chief Bridge. I'm going to start this off and hand it over to Jeff, but the presentation is about the facilities assessment report that you're gonna see tonight, and give you a little background, a little history on that. And it goes back to, and Jeff and I were talking earlier today, summer of 17, we were talking about our facilities, we were talking about our stations, our run zones, and Jeff said we need to come up with a plan for both of those. So over the last year or so, through an RFP process and hiring a company outside, they came in with a final report. And when we were looking at that, we were looking at operational needs, facility needs. I know George Graven sat in front of you about a year ago or so talked about our facilities, some of the older and some of the aging facilities that we have. And if we look at it, especially from the 16 fire districts that we came from, the location of the districts, or the location of the stations, the age of the stations, and some of them just aren't placed in the right spots, and we all know that, and we're doing the best we can. So pushing that forward through the next year and a half, you know, we come down here when we're going to look, what are the next steps? And Jeff's going to talk a little bit about that during the presentation. It's a big push, and in front of this board and in front of the staff, I want to start off this is by really just saying thanks to Jeff Fry. The lion's share of the work, the ideas come up. He's brought some clarity to all this information, and it's a massive amount of information that we have to push forward in over a certain period of time. So without further ado, I'll bring him up. But again, I wanted to recognize him in front of this board tonight, and just with a big thank you of moving this forward and see where this is going to go in the next, hopefully in the next number of years. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Chief Shannon. And as he said, it is a lot of information, so I'm going to jump right in. It should be coming up here. There we go. So, as Chief Shannon said, this is kind of a big undertaking. And I use this slide. You've probably seen this slide from me before. It's a diagram that I use to explain the real estate management process and the 4 phases that are associated with it. All the way from planning a facility, acquiring the land, building it out, managing it, and then obviously planning for the end, what we call life cycle. So in the core there of the diagram, you see a reference to these real estate planning docs. And those are documents that we've had here at the district for quite a long time. And I spell some of those out on the left side there, and generally break those into 2 categories of documents. One, really accounting for the service, location, planning type stuff. And the second part is the financial side. What does this look like in terms of dollars? And I highlight the 2, the station replacement plan and the facility condition assessments, because when I got here and doing my research, I noticed we didn't have a lot of information about the facility management, the 3rd phase of what we do here. So the recommendation that I made to senior staff is we really need to get more information so we can develop a true master plan, what it looks like to service the district. So this project, as Chief Shannon said, was moving us in that direction. So we generally call this project the Facility Condition Assessment, or the FCA, but it was much more than that. The condition assessment's actually made up probably one part of this, and I list out all the objectives that we asked the consultant EMG to account for. 7 objectives in all. When all that information was acquired, we asked them to roll it up into these true facility condition assessments. So that is a report about one station. It's about 50 pages long. It categorizes all of the equipment in the station and all the components of the station, and then estimates a dollar amount to replace all of those over a 20-year period. And at this point in time, I do want to pause, and you can see there's the cover for 111, I believe. This was a big project, and I assure you I did not do it alone. Aaron Castleberry was the administrator for the project, did a lot of work helping me research the project and then doing the RFP and then coordinating all the documents. And then the actual project itself, when it came to do all the data collection, fell on George Graven and the facility staff. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that worked, but just want to stop here and recognize that this is truly a team effort. So here's the process. It really started in earnest in summer of 2018 with the data collection process. I think those 3 bullet points really don't do the work justice. If you can imagine, we asked George Graven and the facilities team to collect all the documents we had about these facilities. Remember, we were 16 predecessor agencies, and a lot of these facilities are 50, 60, 70 years old. Finding documentation was difficult. They did the best they could. They compiled it in one location, shared it with the vendor, and then escorted the vendor to each and every site where they did an extensive review of every facility. Hours and hours of work. We also had ops get in the picture. They helped us do the exhaust study. So they, in every station, pulled out the apparatus, ran the exhaust system, put it back in to get the data there. All of that information was rolled up into the reporting phase of this, which was conducted late last year. Again, we got 44 condition assessments, and then out of that included a lot of capital forecast and maintenance planning, the dollars behind this, if you will. And then what we did for the board is rolled all up into what we call these findings. So I'll talk about the findings here in just a second. So I use this slide to create context so I can kind of dive you into our world. There is, in the facility management phase, is really broken up into two parts. We talk about the operations and maintenance costs, O&M. And then towards the end of the life of the facility, it's called the end of life, or life cycle costs, if you will. So I'm going to take a second here and talk about the O&M costs. And I use the diagram in the top right-hand corner to talk about the cost of a real estate asset in general. And when we talk about the cost, we always think about the design and construction about being a financial toll. It's expensive to build a station. Today, those dollars are about $7 to $8 million to build a new facility. But it pales in comparison to the operation and maintenance costs. When you look at the diagram, we will expect to spend 3 to 4 times that in maintaining that facility over that 50-year life. So within that category of operational costs, we really break that down into 3 categories. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, those being predictive maintenance, reactive maintenance, and preventative maintenance. And I call this out here because the condition assessments really focus on predictive maintenance and reactive maintenance. So you're going to hear me throw a lot of numbers around in a second, and I need you to remember that does not include preventative maintenance. The preventive maintenance takes up a significant part of our facility planning budget. We do use preventive dollars for HVAC, maintaining garage doors. I think George has a category of 5 or 6 things that he really focused on to make sure we continue to respond to calls. And I would also like to note here that all of this information is then rolled up into what we call the replacement reserves. And then we estimate those costs out for 20 years. So when you hear me refer to replacement reserves, we're essentially talking about an annual funding mechanism for this type of work. So to get into the findings, this is how they're typically presented in the industry. We usually talk about a facility condition index, and it's a metric to compare buildings to each other. And we basically take the replacement value, the cost to replace the structure, and divide that by the cost of those repairs, if you will. And then the industry standard is there in front of you, where 0 to 5% is good and goes all the way up to over 60%, which kind of transition us into the end of, we need to start planning for the end of that building, whether it's a major remodel or demolish and start over. So here are the results of that. And these are all the facilities that we evaluated. And I think what I want to point out here is this is as of a week ago. When we first ran this in 2018, all of our facilities were in good condition except for one. So now we've transitioned to 2019. It's a new calendar year. New costs have been added. And just since the new year, the logistics facility 116 and 42 have jumped into that poor category. I think there's a number of planned fixes there for this year that would address those issues, but I think the big key for me here in doing all the research is given where we've come from with the economy and the age and condition of our facilities. Right now, our facilities are in pretty good shape. I was truly impressed. And I think, again, that goes back to George Graven and his staff's diligence and doing his best to keep up with the station requests to keep these facilities maintained. With the next slide tells a bit of a different story. This now looks at the condition index at 3 points in time, currently, in 3 years, and in 10 years. And I think you can see here, in the next 10 years, we have a number of facilities that cross that 60% threshold, 10 to be exact. And my takeaway from this is the right time to be having this conversation. We have a window here to fully develop this plan, come up with a solution, and then work toward addressing these issues that we know are coming in the next 10 years. So that transitioned me into the second part of the facility management phase, where we start talking about planning for the end of an aging facility. And again, there's a cost associated with that, which we're all aware of. But at some point in time, the value of this facility is greatly dwindling, the cost to maintain it is greatly rising, and we really need to come up with the next plan. So for us as a fire district, we need to add in operational considerations, and that includes station functionality. If you think about a modern fire station design and our ability to run calls out of it, that has greatly changed over the decades. Additionally, is we also need to think about location and service planning to be able to meet our board-adopted standards for response. So here's how we accounted for that. The district, our predecessors, have done station replacement plans on a number of occasions. First time was in 2002, was revised in 2005 and 12. And it essentially came up with a recommendation for the replace, remodel, relocate. Now, the way they handled it was they took a number of the facility characteristics, bed, bath count, apparatus size, and so forth, age of facility, and scored it on a 1 to 5 scale. And they used that scoring method to essentially rake the facilities and then kind of use that information to form this replace or remodel recommendation, but it didn't include cost estimates. So one of the objectives we had was to tie a dollar amount to this. And so we retained EMG again, and we asked them to do a space utilization study where we took those same characteristics, 31 in all, and had them document them for every facility, and then compared them to our prototypical station today. And in that, we also wanted to be forward-thinking about what that facility needs to look like for the next 50 years. So we included economic data and risk modeling to figure out the projected number of calls that could be ran out of those stations. And again, derived a cost. Now, what I want to say here is this is truly a planning effort. It's a high-level look. We try to standardize this approach to have it apply equally across, but again, that was difficult. 16 predecessor agencies, 16 different designs across a number of decades. We did our best. We have a number, but I would call it a planning number, okay? So we took that information and put it back into this facility index model, but instead of an FCI, we add the needs index and call it an FCNI, which now includes the cost to modernize all these facilities as previously described. Same metrics apply, and now here is the data. And as you can see, the percentages jump greatly. A number of the facilities are over the 100% mark, which means it would be cheaper to go ahead and replace the facility altogether than to actually continue to maintain it and then fix it up, essentially try to remodel, if you will. In the extreme case of Station 42, that cost is now approaching 400% of the existing facility. I do want to note we only did this for stations. While we evaluated in the FCI our administrative buildings, for this piece, we only evaluated stations.
Yeah.
So here's an overall summary of all the findings. The exhaust systems were found to be in good working order. A couple of minor recommendations were made. Those are fixed, I believe. Yes, I'm getting the nod. Going over the condition index data or the FCI data, Again, 2 are in poor condition, 6 are in fair. In 2018, what I would call the deferred maintenance costs or the immediate repairs costs needed was the $1.5 million. In 2019, we added an additional $1.6 million. Again, that does not include preventative maintenance. And then the one thing I think for the purpose of this conversation is those costs significantly increase in 2021. So here they kind of bounce around about $1 million to $1.5 million a year. I think that number jumps to $3 and then $4 and $5 billion a year in 2021. And then there's a 20-year number for you, $86 million to maintain all our facilities over the next 20 years. And when we add to that the cost to bring our stations up to a modern standard, the EMG consultants determined that cost is about $51 million. I will say that's essentially just construction costs or the cost to modify. It does not include land. It does not include relocation and all those other considerations. So next steps. We do need to finalize the master plan. Getting this information fills in a big gap as it pertains to facility management. We need to incorporate the ops data. That is a board directive back from the old strategic plan, is to consider our response modeling. We also need to evaluate all our administrative buildings, training, and I would include special ops in that group. And then we obviously need to find operational and fiscal efficiencies. They're in there. There is an opportunity to reduce this number. Now we need to roll up our sleeves and find it. So with that said, Chief Shannon asked me to provide you a couple of examples, if you will. And I'll do that quickly here. This is Station 42, and you can see a picture of it there. The arrow points to its location. In the background, this is a heat map, and what I did is pulled all the response data from 2018, and I looked at travel time exclusively, and specifically where travel time was over 7 minutes. So if you recall, our travel time in an urban environment is 4 minutes, and I was just looking at where we were missing the mark and turned it into a heat map. So what jumped off the page really quick here was there is a location near 42 that's hard to get to. It's sandwiched in between the railroad tracks and Roseville Road and the highway, and it's a difficult area to respond to. We've known this. It's not new. In fact, we bought a lot at Watt and Myrtle that's been vacant for a number of years, which essentially addresses this issue. So now, once we add the financial information on the left there, you can see that the actual structure is worth about $775,000. The cost to maintain that structure is estimated to be around $450,000. And then to bring it up to our modern needs to serve that community moving on in the future, there's about $2.8 million. A second example is an opportunity to perhaps combine and replace a station. This is 41 and 112, very close to each other. The graphic you see in the top right-hand corner is a 4-minute response from both of those stations. And the dark magenta color you see there is actually the overlap between the two stations. And then the lighter color on the fringes is where the 4-minute response time is unique to those stations. So I can tell you from a planning perspective, we want some overlap. I would say this is a little much. And there's an opportunity here to probably combine these stations. I include down the bottom corner a graph or a chart of the FCI for Station 41 alone. And what you see here is the cost to maintain that station for the next 4 years is relatively low. However, in 2022, there are significant expenses that need to be invested in this facility, and that would essentially put us over the 60% threshold for that facility. And then when we combine that with the financial information we got from the Facility Condition Index, you can see that the value of the two facilities together is about $2 million. The 20-year capital reserve need is about $2.1 million, and to modernize both of these stations would cost us about $3.7 million. So, in closing, I think the information here is a good tool for financial planning and budget decision-making. When I ran all of this by Chief Harms, he immediately noted that this is a great subject for the Strategic Plan Summit coming up in 2019, and probably it's more appropriate to talk about this in that setting. And the third part is, this basically boils down to money. We need to be able to identify the capital funding to put all this together and move forward. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. And if you have any questions, we'll probably try to tag team them. Anything about facilities in particular, George Graven is here. I can answer anything about the master planning process, and I will put Amanda on the spot if there's any overarching financial considerations.
Mr. Fry, thank you so much. Heck of an introduction to a huge issue, complicated issue that this board will continue and delve into in the near future, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Comments and questions? Why don't we just start on my left and we'll go down through? Director Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fry, thank you so much for that. Appreciate all the detail. My question's very simple. Why wasn't 68 included in any of those charts?
Because 68 actually factors into our growth plan, and this is focusing on existing stations. 68 will be funded by our impact fees. Since it's still technically a new station, it does not fit into this category. And if you recall at the end there, I said we need to factor in our growth plan. So that's an additional large amount of money, I think 15 stations planned. So ideally, we would put these two plans together and look for opportunities to combine stations, move them, and use different funding sources as well.
Trying to keep it light, because this is a monumental task to even consider the work that needs to be done. Yeah, being in the construction industry for 30-plus years, it's, really easy to understand for me. I did on Station 42.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you thinking of relocating that station or just redoing that building?
So I think the challenge with 42 is it's literally on a postage stamp lot. I think it's less than an acre. Our typical standard today is about 2 acres. So in that situation, I think the answer, it does need to be relocated.
I just wanted you to consider the fact that there's probably a handful of people that work at that station that will not be happy they're going to be that they're going to be further away from
The Wiener Schnitzel?
Interstitial.
You knew that was coming.
Fair enough.
You just couldn't let the night go without a reference to the Wiener.
Can we include Chief Shannon on that list?
I love that station too, Director.
Jeff, wonderful job. I mean, this is really probably the most depth I've ever seen in the overlaying of multiple databases. It's just phenomenal. And it certainly will lend well to the conversation in strategic planning, because you're giving us the kind of tools that we need. As we've sat and watched this kind of evolution of our different firehouses around and different plans that go into to look at all of that. I'm wondering if anyone's ever taken one more lens of this at the gentrification of our different areas. So much of our response is based on the aging of the population that lives in the region or lives in that area. And I just haven't seen yet anything that's looking at the trend of the gentrification of that area, because that will impact significantly our call volume. But this was over the top awesome. It was just, you can tell the depth and the thought process that went into this was incredible. So kudos to you and the team for that. I look very much forward to having this conversation at our strategic plan. But I'm just wondering if in your world of all of this, anybody's looked at the uniqueness of what we do in the medical response part of it, and how, for instance, in some parts of the area, it's getting older and older, which means more and more requests for services.
And to add on to that is, as those neighborhoods gets older, the density of the population
Yeah.
increases. And the answer is yes, we have tools that, and that's what I call economic data or response, risk response.
Yeah.
So we do have that information. I do have it in a very easy to look at format that we can talk about. But it's important to note, a lot of the times we talk about Urban response being to a community over 1,000 people per square mile in density. Some of the neighborhoods we're talking about here are now over 15,000 people per square mile. And it lends to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Director Sailors?
Yes, I'd like to just say I'd just like to say thank you for this wonderful report. I love seeing this kind of pre-planning, looking 20 years into the future. And this kind of detail that looks this in-depth, I think it's wonderful. And I'm looking forward to working on this in the future. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Anybody else? Let's go. I'd like to say sorry, Director Clark? All right. No, thank you very, very much for this. And historically, I'd like to also point out that 15 or more years ago, Metro began an analysis of station location, response times, et cetera. But due to that economic turndown in 2008, a lot of stuff had to be put on the back burner. And I am very confident that this new look that we're doing is going to be more sophisticated and more in-depth, more detail, and all that will result in better emergency response for our community. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to move to reports. President's report. Nothing to report at this time. Fire Chief's report. Acting Chief Bridge.
Well, thank you, directors. A couple of announcements. Effective March 31st, Battalion Chief Anthony Castros, 28 years of service, retired. Had quite the career for us, and he continues to work in the fire service. Reclassification, we have effective April 1st, Sherry Martucci was reclassified to a business applications analyst in the IT division. And, excuse me, in 2019, our battalion chief promotional exam, final filing date was amended to May 3rd at 4 p.m. And we'll be having a battalion chief's academy that week, shortly after that week too, and with the exam to follow at the end of May. And when I last spoke with you, the last board meeting, we were talking about the captain's exam, wondering how that turned out. So little updates. I'd like to congratulate the following personnel who successfully completed the fire exam, and they will be promoted on April 16th. They are Carl Jewell, TJ Loris, Nick Mack, Travis Van Arnhem, James Doyle, Ryan Ross, Tyler Smith, Corey Keebler, Jeremy Crawford, Kyle Sr., Sean Scollard, Michael Bonham, Joel Greenfield, Kurt Katsuyoshi, Josh Larson, Trevor Gordon, Dustin McNabb, and Kalen Clark. Those are just the ones that are promoted on the 16th. The following personnel also successfully completed the exam and have been placed on the eligibility roster, which is scheduled to expire on March 31st of 2021. And there's 4 remaining on that list. Ryan Pullis, Dat Pham, Vincent Purcell, and Aaron Todd. So that list probably will not survive very long. Upcoming events. Fire Camp will be held June 25th through the 28th at Station 21. Kids ages 11 to 13. Cost to attend the camp is $125, and the deadline to apply is May the 10th. All information can be found on our website, metrofire.ca.gov/firecamp. And that is my report.
Thank you very much, Chief Bridge. Thank you very much, Chief Bridge. Now we have our operations report from Chief Neville.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Let's see if I can get this up and working. Oh, we got the old PowerPoint up. Since the last time we met in the EMS world for responses, Metro Fire and our partner in AMR have responded to about 2,800 calls, transporting about 73% of the time. On the operational side of the house, we've had about 3,624 calls. 9 of those have been active structure fires. And for training, we've done our PDP program, and folks have been working on driving EVOC, trying to drive down some of our accident rates, if you will. And live fire continues to be worked on at Station 52, where we're working with in a coordinated effort to work on giving our members experiences in that live fire environment. Wildland task level training is starting up, getting ready for a build-up to fire season. And in that note, as we briefed out, I think the last couple of times we talked, one of the 2 copters from the East Coast has been delivered and the other one's en route. And this morning, we had a fire I want to highlight on a closing note here and give you some more good news to talk about. This should pop up in a minute. You guys got it there?
Not yet.
Not yet? There we go. This actually happened this morning and did not make the news cycle. This was a structure fire that happened about 8:30 in the morning in Battalion 5's area. And what's interesting to note here, the crews had a large column en route, and on their arrival, all of the members of the family were out of the house. What's significant to note is that they were all deaf. And one of their neighbors had the foresight to pound on the door, realizing that wasn't going to work, kicked in the door, found one in the shower and two of them in their bedrooms getting ready for their day, and then physically drugged them after having to convince them the house is truly on fire. The garage was well involved, fire through the roof on arrival to get them out. That individual will be recommended for an award, and we'll see how that goes, and you'll probably see them later. But again, that didn't make the news cycle. That happened this morning. Crews made quick work of it, knocked it down, and limited the fire to the garage. And the rest of the house is, of course, smoke damage, but their belongings mostly were saved. And we did have some impingement on another house. So again, our citizens out there doing good work along with our fire department. So let's give you guys a quick heads up on that. Without any further questions, that'll end my report.
Are there any questions for Chief Neville? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Well,
Appreciate it. Okay, report number 3, SMFD Firefighters Local 522. Welcome to the podium, Jason.
Good evening, Madam President, directors. Chief Bridge, look good in that chair. General Counsel, Madam Clerk. Joel Roberts, I'm a director for Local 522, and I'm a captain at Station 101 on B shift. So unfortunately, Trevor Jameson couldn't be here tonight. He and his hair send their regards.
You'll see the film of this.
Yeah, well, he gets it. He knows he's got good hair. He's at a Ron Perlman lookalike contest up in Reno tonight, so. Anyway. I just want to touch on a few things like Chief Bridge talked about. Congratulate our members. 18 promotions going on in just a matter of days, so congratulations and good luck to them. I wanted to touch on, I know Trevor touched on it last board meeting, but my station, Station 101, was dedicated in memory of firefighter Jimmy Saunders. It was a great event, very appropriate. Thank you for your attendance. Most of you could make it. I wanted to thank Brenda Briggs. She did a great job putting the ceremony together. George Graven, his team and facilities, notably John Rayside, mounting the plaque. It's very tastefully done. Jimmy's wife, Holly, was very appreciative and wanted to express her appreciation as well. So in March, a contingent from Local 522 went to Washington, D.C. for the legislative legislative conference. And we're able to lobby with members of Congress to help our members with protections, apparatus, equipment, health and safety, things like that. And then this week, California Professional Firefighters, which is led by Brian Rice, led the California State Legislative Conference. So again, building those relationships and pushing legislation that help protect our members, get apparatus, equipment, training, health and safety, because when those things happen for our members, they help your constituents receive a good end product. So that's a positive thing in the state. And then also want to express our appreciation for the continued support of the Labor Management Committee. While we don't always see eye to eye on every issue, it's a very positive committee, and work does get done, and the membership appreciates it, and again, your constituents see that at the end of the day. I wanted to make note, April marks a full year of negotiations that have been going on. Obviously, the last 3 months we've been out of contract, so we look forward in the coming weeks, and we're committed to that process, and look forward to coming to a fiscally responsible agreement that also rewards our members for the good work that they do every day. So that's all the comment I have right now, unless there's any questions.
Any questions, comments? Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the report. We'll move to committee and delegate reports. There is no report from the executive committee. We have the Communications Center, JPA.
And I can
Or representative?
speak for Chief Wagman on that. There's been no meeting since then. The next one's scheduled for April 23rd at 9 a.m. at 3121 Gold Canal.
Thank you, sir. California Fire and Rescue, JPA. Chief Shannon?
California Fire Rescue Training Authority has not met for some time. Good news is we will meet next Thursday across the hall on the 18th at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Finance and Audit Committee, Director Kelly?
The Finance and Audit Committee will be meeting on the 25th.
Thank you very much. Policy Committee report, Director Gould?
No report?
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to board member questions and comments. And this time I will begin to my far right and we'll move across the dais. Director Sailors.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to say congratulations to the, all those firefighters that took the captain's promotional and are going to be promoted on the 16th of this month. Congratulations. I'm looking forward to fire camp. I would like to see what that entails. I hope to be there. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sailors. Director Gould?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, thank you to staff for your reports tonight. Jeff, again, kudos. That's just one of the most detailed plans I've heard in a long time. Really looking forward to the strategic plan where we can really dive into the details. And I'm just going to do my annual call out to organizations in the community, because we know thousands of them watch this board meeting. But just make a call out to get a major funder for fire camp. You just have to go one time and see the interactions to understand the importance of that camp. And in a area as large as ours, with as many major corporations, the lift that it would cost a corporation to fully sponsor that is pretty small. And I'd love to see one of those organizations step up and really get behind this. So that's my annual call out. I wish somebody would do that. It'd go a long way to making this bigger. We could really tap into a different population on occasion as far as our students or attendees. But I hope that happens. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Rosali?
Thank you. Very briefly, Jeff, I want to thank you for the report. This is great work, enormously valuable to us, and very well done. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Wood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two things. It's always so easy, and what we usually hear up here from members of the public are when they're in the heat of their anger and frustration. We don't usually hear the good and the positive. So I really want to thank Mr. White for reaching out and asking to commend and comment on the services he received. It's good to hear those comments. And last, I'll echo what's already been said. Congratulations to the promotions, but also June 22nd, Firefighters Burn Institute Tropical Affair. Want to see all of you there this year. Hopefully nobody has any pre-arranged commitments that'll keep them from it. But we've had 5, 6 directors at the last couple. It'd be good to see all 9 there. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Wood. Director Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll also like to thank Mr. Fry for an excellent presentation. And congratulations again to the guys that passed the captain's exam. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kelly?
Mr. Fry, thank you very much for your report. And as always, I'm a proud member of the board that, Metro Fire, the high-performing organization that it is. Well, I'd like to see you squirm in that seat someday, just like Director Scatter. We'll get our chance, I'm sure. Thank you.
All right. Director Sheets?
Good evening. I also, too, would like to thank the presentation items. Very, very informative. I'd like to wish Mr. Castro a long retirement and congratulate all of the members that promoted. That's really an awesome accomplishment.
Okay. Reiterating what's already been said, congratulations on the captain's promotions, for the facility condition assessment excellent. And thank you to Mr. White for his very heartfelt comments to the board. We appreciate it. Hearing no other further business before this board, we are hereby adjourned.
All right.